Good to see you.
Great to see you as well.
How are you?
Oh, really good. Really good.
Good.
Where are you right now?
I'm at my home in Boise, Idaho.
Beautiful. And you were just down in New Mexico, yeah?
I was. Yeah.
How was
Friday through Sunday or Monday.
Yeah.
It was incredibly magical. It was just the hugest blessing. Have you been there before?
I have not. We were planning on having that opening down in Taos be a part of this trip, but there were just too many. It had become too stressful, all the different flights and all the different driving around. So we cut that and a couple of other stops out, unfortunately. But please fill me in. It looked magical and beautiful.
Yeah, I have wanted to go. We're talking about the Neem Karoli Baba Ashram in Taos. And I'd wanted to go for a number of years since a friend of mine who's in the Sangha first mentioned it. And so I would look at like Maharaji's birthday or different celebrations like that and maybe think like, oh, maybe now I can go down. And I've never actually been to Taos either, but it hasn't worked out. And then we were with Hanuman Das, East Forest Sanai Krishna, and we were with Hanuman Das, who has helped to caretake and spearheads the creation of the Hanuman Mandir, and this other Sangha member, Ira, from Chicago, and his wife, Mia. And they kind of said to us when we were there in Maui at the spring retreat, East Forest, you should perform at the opening of this temple. And I was just kind of ecstatic inside, but didn't want to say anything and just kind of sat there like, yeah, that would be a great idea. Meanwhile, thinking I would do anything for this to happen. And it ended up working out. So he was invited to come down and play and perform, which I was just so thrilled about. And we were at his place together in Boulder, Utah, in southern Utah for a couple weeks beforehand, spending time there out in nature in the national park and hiking and things like that. And then we did a 2-day trip down because Taos isn't actually that easy to get to either. You probably discovered that when you were looking into flights. So we drove down from Boulder and stopped by Chaco Canyon on the way there, which is an ancient civilization site, which I just love that kind of stuff. And then went to the ashram. And I, in my mind, was thinking like desert Taos, like I had looked at pictures online, but I guess I didn't get a good scope of it. And so in my mind, I was thinking like, probably like maybe more like Joshua Tree, like desolate plain, and not a lot of vegetation and kind of sparse and probably out in the middle of nowhere. But it ended up being kind of like in a residential district in Taos. And there was trees everywhere and vegetation. It was on a farm and just this really beautiful setup for the ashram, the Neem Karoli Baba ashram, which was opened, I guess, started in the early 80s. And when they brought over this giant marble flying Hanuman Murti or statue in the early 80s, they'd always wanted to have a real temple built for it. And so it has taken 40 years for that to actually happen. So this was the opening of this brand new mandir temple and the Sangha that came through. And of course, the huge blessing of Baba Ram Das being there.
Amazing. He hadn't left Maui in 14 or so years.
Exactly. We had heard from Hanuman Das that at the spring retreat, when they said, we're going to have the opening finally, it's going to happen at this time in July, that Ram Dass just kind of like threw his fist down and was like, I'm going. And everybody's around him like, that's impossible. There's no way that can happen. I'm going, and just insisted. He's the president of the board of the temple, so he can kind of maybe say what he wants to have happen. And they had it happen. They got a plane for him and a doctor 24/7, and his 4 caretakers were there, and of course Dasima. And he was there. He was there the whole time.
He's so amazing. He nearly just left his body, super unwell. Everyone worried about him. And I just love that. He's so full of enthusiasm and vitality still, huh?
Yeah. And he seemed great. And of course, him coming into the temple for the first time and being there and seeing it all is just such a huge full circle heart explosion moment for him and everybody else. And just all the pujas and chanting of the Chalisa and the different people from the like the Indian community that came through too was really beautiful. And Joan Halifax was there, and Gurmukh was there, and other people showed up to honor him in the temple. And so it was just such an honor. I can't even say that enough. It was just such an honor to also be there too, and have Esports perform and have his offering be there as well to give back.
So beautiful. Well, it's also an honor to be with you, and I'm so glad we got to meet at Mammoth Lakes, and that class I did with you and East Forest was just exquisite. Like I was sharing with you when we caught up afterwards, I was just in tears of bliss, like the whole time. And we joked about that being that it was like my first class in about a year, but it was an extraordinary class, really one of my favorite classes I've ever taken. So
wow.
Thank you. It was really beautiful and just my jam, that mindful, slow moving reverence, and it was just perfect. And with the music of East Forest backing it, I mean, it's powerful what you're both doing, huh?
Thank you. We love it. And I loved that class too. I love teaching at festivals and environments like that, because you get to teach something in a little bit like, I don't know, more perhaps like potent and focused way than in your regular studio classes. Sure. And take people kind of on a more explicit journey, and I felt the power in the room that day for sure. People were quite receptive.
Totally. Yeah. I find it both powerful and also challenging teaching at festival vibes, but they did it really well there in that they contained the space really well. At a lot of festivals, it can be quite distracting, I find, between the different like arenas and that. But I think they did really well in creating, I guess, separation between the different stages and whatnot.
I would say that's probably one of the festivals I've been at that had the most sense of separation, because we were just in that kind of conference room. Whereas other places, it's like you're out in a field and there's other tents over here and there's people walking by and people are coming in and out and people are on their own journey and you're the bleed over from the other sound of the other places. So it can take a little bit more sometimes in those environments. This was like a little nest for sure at Mammoth. They did do a good job with that.
Now, I'd love to know more about your journey for myself and just to share with the listeners as well, how your sadhana and also the way you teach has evolved. Can you kind of wrap it up where your yoga journey began and to like where it is today? Because it really is a beautiful, rich offering that you're bringing to the community.
Thanks. I hope you don't mind the long story.
Sure, go for it. I'll listen.
I've been teaching now for almost 20 years, but I always have to start, I guess, when I was a teenager. I grew up in Florida, in Daytona Beach, Florida, born and raised down there. And when I was 15, I took psychedelics for the first time. I took LSD, and I didn't have any kind of spiritual, psychological prep in any way. It was like the first substance I'd ever even done. So I kind of like jumped into the like way deep side of the ocean, and it was really hard. It was really challenging. It was one of the like, I don't want to say one of the worst experiences of my life, because it was actually really beautiful, but it was definitely like shamanic death, because little baby Marisa had no idea what that plane of consciousness could be like. So it was really difficult. And I came out of it though with this sense, I was raised Roman Catholic, and I was just at a point in my life where I was kind of pondering like, oh, maybe I should turn towards religion in a more conscious choice way. Like I'm going to choose to do that with my life. And I was just, I think, about to do that when that experience with psychedelics happened. And it was so eye-opening in that it was, wow, there's a lot more going on than I've been told, or that I realize, or that I've ever experienced. And what is that? What is consciousness? What is the nature of reality? What was that thing that I just experienced, and how was I able to have that experience? And I was still in such a fragile state too, like you might have after you have a bad experience on psychedelics. So it took a long time to reintegrate. And I really just did that on my own. I talked to maybe a couple friends about it, but I didn't have many resources. So I started my spiritual journey then, trying to learn from the East, basically, or maybe different new age psychologies about what was beyond the scope of normal waking consciousness and the paradigm of the culture that we live in. And I'd heard about yoga along the way through those studies, but it wasn't until I was in college, actually, that I first practiced yoga. But in high school, I would practice things like meditation and just did a lot of reading also and personal reflection. So when I did my first yoga class, I actually learned out of a book. It was Richard Hillman's 28-Day Exercise Plan was the book that a friend, an older woman, suggested to me. This woman, Sherry, that I worked with at a restaurant. I was a waitress in college. And I love thinking of Sherry in my mind because in my mind, I was like 19, 20, and she was this older woman who was probably like as old as I am now, which is just a great point of self-reflection. Like, oh, that's me now. Sherry, an older woman. I don't feel that old. She probably didn't feel that old either. Anyways, Sherry suggested this book. She said, oh, I did this when I was your age. And so I got it and I started a home yoga practice out of this book. And I was studying psychology in school. And I was really interested in just the nature of the mind and emotions and where it comes from and behaviors. And I noticed through this, it's a 15-minute daily practice, through this like really short, simple, accessible 15-minute daily practice that I was doing, how my behaviors and my mindset was changing. And so I saw this great interlink at that time. It was like 2000, 2001 between yoga and psychology, and that the two worked together. And so I finished the book, and then I started taking classes at the college. It was down at New College in Florida, over in Sarasota. And my teachers were these students, Eric and Isabel, and they were peers, and they had gone down to the Bahamas to the Shivananda Ashram and then came back and just started teaching to us students there. So I took those classes through college, and then I graduated and I had my degree in psychology, and I was like, okay, well, I know I've got to continue my learning experience. I'll probably go to graduate school or study something else. And I had enough insight then to really think to myself, okay, well, if you're going to do something for the rest of your life, make sure that it's something that you really enjoy. And so I thought about everything, all the experiences I've had through college, what have you just enjoyed the most? And that was the yoga class that I had taken and the yoga experiences that I was having. And then I saw too, of course, how it was like psychology or a form of psychology, though I didn't really know how, but I knew it was affecting me personally in that way and giving me a deeper sense of myself. And so it's like, okay, well, Eric and Isabel are teachers, so I can probably become a yoga teacher too. So they inspired me because they were young. And at that time, yoga wasn't like how it is today, where it's everywhere and saturated. And it kind of has become like a younger thing, it seems, in a lot of ways. So that was cool that they were there and could inspire me. Like, I can also become a teacher. And so then I decided to take a trip post-college and study all through India and go to all these different ashrams. There was a great book I found at a used bookstore called something like From Here to Nirvana that was all about the different ashrams in India. And I just kind of went through and was like, I'm going to go here and here and here and study this and this and do this teacher or study with this teacher. And had this whole trip planned for January. I was going to leave in 2002. And that fall, I was getting ready to go. And that fall was September 11th. That happened right before I was supposed to go on this trip to India. So then at the time, things kind of shifted and became really intense. And the idea of me going over to the Middle East by myself was like, I don't know if that's a good idea. And I know my parents are probably going to worry sick the entire time if I still do that. So I thought, okay, well, it's probably best to not do that now, but I'll go to India at some point. I just don't have to do that now. But what's the important piece of the trip for me is going to study yoga and getting my teacher training. So then I just did like a simple search, like international yoga teacher training. And one of the first ones that popped up, or really the only one I remember even, was at the Nosara Yoga Institute in Costa Rica. And that was happening that January in 2002. And so I was like, oh, well, I can go down to Costa Rica by myself and live down there for a month and do that. So I just rerouted everything and ended up going there instead and just fell in love with the teaching of Don and Amba Stapleton, who started the institute down there. And they came out of the Kripalu lineage. They were both heavily involved with that all through like the 80s and a lot of the 90s with Amrita Sai. And so studied with them. And that felt like this experience of like a university or master's degree or experience, graduate level experience of like how to be the best human possible is what I got out of my yoga teacher training. So much self-awareness and awareness about others and spirits and, interconnection. And as soon as I got back from my teacher training, I went to back to Florida, and I just started teaching right away. So I just started to teach to my friends that were still in college. And so just hit the ground running, teaching, wherever I could. And then went back and did another advanced teacher training with them, another 100 hours that April. And then goodness gracious. Oh, and when I was there in Costa Rica, I met a man who was running a juice bar in Nosara. He was a Canadian, and he and I hit it off and had a relationship. And he invited me to come back. And so when I came back in April, I stayed with him. And then he went back to Canada through the summer. And I had gone to Washington to spend time with my dad through the summer. And then we met up in Ottawa, where he was at that fall, and studied with Batabi Joyce, who was on his last world tour. So got to be with him for about a week in Montreal. And then this guy's name is Colin. Colin and I did a 10-day Vipassana sit together. And then we drove with another couple from Ottawa, Canada, all the way down through America and Central America to Costa Rica. And then lived in Costa Rica that next year together, running a juice bar on the beach, his juice bar. And then teaching at the Yoga Institute and teaching more with Don and Amba. And let's see, how much of the story do you want to know?
Keep going. I'm loving it.
Okay,
it's
well,
rich.
part of my experience with Colin was that when we were first getting together, I had a dream, or I was sleeping and I had a dream. I'll make this story not as detailed as I could, but I had a dream essentially, and I woke up and I saw this vision of this little girl that was maybe like 2 or 3 or 4 with curly blonde hair and big blue eyes. And I had a sense of knowing that if he and I were together, we would have this baby. And I was just like, oh my God, I want this baby so bad. And I was like 23 at the time and just at a school and didn't have like a home or like a car, resources, or what you normally have when you think I'm going to have children. And I wasn't even with him yet when I had the dream either. We were just friends. But that was so, I don't know, it was so powerful for me. I just wanted it. So it kind of influenced me being in relationship with him even, because I was at this young age of like, probably like, I don't know what I want and I want to be free and I'm a blah, 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 and just kind of like, finding your way. But this image of this daughter was so strong for me. So then when we were coming down to Costa Rica, we decided to start to try to have a baby, because it was kind of like a seed that I would plant. Like, yeah, I think that would, in whatever way I was able to do that. So we decided to try to have a baby, and then I was pregnant. So then I was living in Costa Rica and teaching yoga and running this juice bar and pregnant. And then I was just like, what were you thinking? Now what are you going to do? Are you going to live in Costa Rica now and have this baby? Are you going to marry this guy? Are you going to move to Canada? What are you going to do? And I was just like, I don't know, actually. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking. It was just like heart, what I wanted. And so I was down there for a while and going through that. And I obviously called my parents to tell them that I was having a baby. And my parents had moved from Florida to Montana when I started college. So they were out west in Montana. And a couple weeks after I told my mom that I was pregnant, she called me to say that she was also pregnant. So she was at the time, again, similar to my age now, which is so funny. She was like 42, 43, and this was her 7th pregnancy. It's the 7th kid that she was going to have. And she was a surprise for her. She was not planning on having any more children. So I was down in Costa Rica for a while, for about 8 months or so through that. And then I left in the spring because he wanted to go back to Canada because he had a summer job there. And I was like, well, I'm going to go to Montana and spend the rest of the pregnancy with my mom. And so that's what I did. We left each other so I could go to Montana, and he went to Canada. And then my mom and I were due around the same time. And he came and was with me like a week before I had Maya and a week after. And then my mom and I ended up having the babies on the same day in the same hospital right next to each other.
Wow, that just gave me shivers. That's incredible.
It was incredible. Incredible.
Wow.
Incredible. Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. So then she had my brother, who was named Morgan, and I had my daughter Maya, and we had decided, Colin and I, like, I knew that we weren't meant to be life partners. That wasn't the feeling sense. It was like, he's an amazing man, but it's not that man for me. And there would be somebody else that was his partner for him. And so he ended up going back to Canada and got back in a relationship that he had had before. And they're still together today and have their daughters. And he went that route and has his life. And then I had Maya, this baby. And so then I ended up staying in Montana for 5 years after I had her. And I opened up a yoga studio there with my mom, and then went back to school and got my degree, my master's degree in transpersonal psychology. And just was like that, like living the rest of my 20s in rural Montana, in the middle of nowhere, running the studio and in school and working and that kind of thing. And yeah, so that's kind of a lot of my yoga journey there. The whole time, like I knew when I was in my yoga teacher training too, I was probably the youngest student at the time in the training, that I was there because yoga was going to be my profession. Like this was my life path. This is what I wanted to do with my whole entire life, that I would always teach. Where a lot of other folks were there just to learn more, which is a wonderful way, a reason to do a teacher training also. But that was what I was going to be. So I was teaching at the studio that I'd created with her, and then teaching things like yoga history and philosophy at the local university, and just always continuing to teach and teach and teach. And then long story short, I ended up here in Boise in 2009 and opened up a studio here in town, which I still have, and then went back with my teachers, Don and Amba, and did more trainings. One of my biggest life goals was if I could go back to Costa Rica and assist them for one of their month-long teacher trainings. For me, that would be the greatest honor. So I eventually got to do that in January of 2015. I went back with Maya, who was like 13 at the time, and my son Benji, who was like around 3 at the time, and got to assist their teacher training, and just have been so devoted to them and their style of teaching, which they call self-awakening yoga. And it's more about they call it like the expansion of consciousness through the body's own wisdom, and really helping the student learn to listen to the messages that are always coming from the body and coming from prana, and trusting your own internal prana and awakening your own internal prana, and really having it be like an individual experience of yoga that the teacher is helping to guide this process of self-discovery, and developing the capacity for witness consciousness is another big piece in it as well.
Sounds amazing. And when did Ram Dass come into the story for you?
So Ram Dass, this is an amazing story too. So when I decided not to go to India in September of 2001, that fall, I was like, well, I was supposed to go out west and visit my family in Montana where they traveled. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to fly. I'll take a train. And so I took a train from Florida to New York City, and then from New York City all the way out to Montana. Was out in Montana visiting my family, and then eventually went to my dad's place in Washington, and we went to Vancouver for a holiday just for the weekend. And we were in Gastown, Vancouver, and I love old bookstores and antique shops and things like that. And so there's this old bookstore that I walked in. Oh, this is the part on the train. When I was on the train from Florida to New York, I was in the smoking car, and there was this guy in there that kind of looked like the artist, the musician Meatloaf, like this big guy with long hair that was kind of older, like wearing all black. And we just started talking, and I maybe told him I was going to do my teacher training or something. And he mentioned Ram Dass, who I hadn't really encountered previously that much. I hadn't read any of his books yet through college. There was other thinkers like Alan Watts, people like that I was studying more. And so, but he said, if you come across this book, Be Here Now, you're going to love it. And so I kind of just tucked that piece of information in. Like, okay, I'll keep an eye out for Be Here Now. So then fast forward, I was in this used bookshop, and I walk in, and it's just one of those places that was like piled high with books everywhere, scattered. Maybe there's some organization, but it doesn't really seem like it. And there's just thousands of books. And back in the corner, there was a guy sitting behind a desk, like behind all these books. And I see him, but I walk in and I pull a book off the shelf, and I think, oh, I should look for Be Here Now. So I put this book back, and I go back to the guy, and I'm like, hey, do you have this book, Be Here Now? I think it's by, a guy, Ram Dass. And he looks through whatever kind of system he might have, which isn't really a system. And he's like, no, we don't have it. I'm like, okay. And I keep looking around the bookstore and pulling things out. And I'm like, oh, I should look at that book that I pulled out when I first walked in. And so I go back to the book and I pulled it off the shelf, and it was Be Here Now. It was an old original copy of Be Here Now.
Original in the box and everything.
Well, not in the box, but just like an old version from like the 70s, which, you know, the cover, it's kind of strange with like the chair and those lines, that weird mandala. Yeah. And so when I pulled it off the shelf, I didn't read it. I didn't look at it. I was just like, I don't know what that book is. I'm going to go look for Be Here Now. And I came back and was like, wow. And that gave me in the moment that I did it, like full body chills, like, oh my gosh, this is the book. That's the book that I walked in and pulled off the shelf out of all the thousands of books. So of course I bought that copy and read it during my teacher training. So I read Be Here Now then during that time, and it was just all landed so potently. And I'd studied Buddhism in college too. And I remember like one of the mantras that he used a lot in the book is Om Mani Padme Hum, which is what I have tattooed on the inside of my arm. I had already had then, and it was just a lot. It was just so beautiful. And then I gave it away to somebody else to read, and I probably bought like 20 copies over the years and just continually gave them away. You know, it was one of those books like, oh, if you want to start on a spiritual path, here's a really great book. So I've given it away so many times, and he came into my life then, and then I would continue to read his books over the years and kind of incorporate his wisdom and teachings, and felt just such a strong connection to him. Maharaji, I wasn't that familiar with until more recently, where I got married and moved to Boise, and then I was getting divorced after being married for about 10 years. And I had a friend that ran a yoga festival in Sun Valley. He was a yoga student. He was a devotee of Maharaji and come to the retreats, and he would kind of always tell me about it when he was going. And so he was coming from Sun Valley to Boise, and he said, hey, you know, my ex-husband and I, we built like a guest quarters so we could have host people all the time. Can I come and stay in your hacienda? And I'm like, well, it's actually full. Somebody's in there, but I just had rented an apartment that we were separating. And I'm like, I just got this apartment. I haven't even stayed in it yet, but I'm not going to tell you no, because I actually have a place that you could stay while you're coming through town. So why don't you stay in this place? This is, you know, how you get there. And so he was coming from Sun Valley to go to stay in Boise to fly to the spring retreat in May. And he stayed at the spot. And then he stayed there when he returned too, on his way back through. And I didn't see him. We just came in and out. But when I went to the apartment after he had left me a little pendant of Maharaji. And then he left me like a Be Here Now t-shirt too, that he'd gotten from the retreat. And so I just saw the pendant and I picked it up and I put it on a necklace and started to wear it, though I wasn't that familiar with Maharaji's teachings. And then East Forest and I, Krishna, we had been friends, and he also simultaneously started to go through a divorce. And he was passing through Boise because he would come from Portland, Oregon, down to Boulder, Utah, and Boise's kind of right in the middle. So sometimes we would start to see each other when he was passing through. We were both going through this process. And I didn't know that Ram Dass and Maharaji were in his life in that way, or in any way, because we hadn't really talked about it. But I was wearing this pendant, and it was one of the first times that he was there with me. And he just like, he was almost like the first time maybe he had like hugged me or we had embraced, and he looked down and he saw that I was wearing Maharaji's pendant and just basically started weeping. Like, I can't believe that you're wearing that. And I didn't even know who he was. And he had discovered Maharaji through his own divorce process and had gotten the book Love Everyone. And it was really healing for him in his process. When he was going through a hard time, and he had printed out a picture of Maharaji. And that was really helping him. And so then he was looking at Maharaji kind of like for signs. And he had actually said in that moment that he saw the necklace, he's like, you know, when the universe just kind of gives you signs when you're supposed to like go this way or go that way, and the sign can really tell you the way to go. And as he said that, then he saw that I was wearing this pendant. And so then he gave me a copy of the book, Love Everyone. And through reading Love Everyone, did I really start to develop a relationship with Maharaji? He really start to come alive for me? And now it's like full on. Like here, I've got like a frame picture of him right here.
Yeah.
And then like from just being at the ashram to next to me on the table, there's more like 10 like other photos of him just like here. Like I just can't get enough. I've got all of my collection of Maharaji pictures, and I've given other people. I got a few more of the little pendants of him when I was just there to give to friends. Now when I've gotten back, not knowing what impact that might have on their life, but knowing what an impact it had on my life when it was given to me.
What does it feel for you in the current day where there's a lot of gurus are kind of getting revealed to be abusive and to be exploiting their power? There's a lot of collective negativity about the guru.
Yeah, there is.
How do you feel about that, for one? And what do you feel the guru energy?
Like when I found Don and Amba at in Nosara, I thought, well, I want Don and Amba to be my gurus. Like I definitely felt that they were my teachers. And Don was very much like, I am not a guru. I don't have disciples. That's not part of what happens here. It's about you doing your own practice of self-discovery. Because he was with Amrit Desai, who was one of the first Indian gurus to have come over, then have a real falling out. And so he was very much anti that. And so then that was kind of my perspective too. Like, even though I wanted Don to be my guru, we didn't have that kind of relationship. And then I always felt like when I needed or wanted a teacher in a specific way and just kind of internally wanted that, then the book or the teaching would arrive. And so I felt like I had these more like external gurus that weren't there in person. And then, it's interesting. Don had that really kind of hard line from his wound, from his relationship with Amrit Desai, Guru Dev, for a very, 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 very long time. And 2 years ago, they sent out a letter that goes to like the graduates of the school about this reconciliation that Don had with Amrit Desai and how powerful and moving it was. And I remember reading this letter of his accounts of them finally talking again after maybe something like 20 years and what that felt like, and just feeling all of the powerful emotional release that was coming through that. And for him as a devotee to have that type of forgiveness with his teacher, and then fast forward, them beginning to reconnect, and there's this like tenderness and love and humanness that's come out of it also. So I hadn't gone to India either after that first time that I'd wanted to go. And finally, my teachers, Don and Amba, they closed the institute and they don't teach there anymore and retired. And they then said that they were going to take their first trip to India where they were going to take students, and they were going with Amrit Desai. And so for me, I was like, well, perfect. This is the time when I can finally go to India, and I'll go with my teachers and their teachers. So I went to India for the first time ever, just this past February, over my 40th birthday. It was a 2-week period that I got to go to Rishikesh and be with Don and Amba, but their teachers, and then see again, what you're describing, that guru relationship. And I hadn't ever met Amrit Desai, and he has this I Am Yoga program now that he's doing and other great things, but there were definitely like the new modern devotees of his, and was able to witness that relationship, which, I see the guru as someone who lets you know that what potential there is for awakening, what potential there is for compassion and living love and living with wisdom, that there's someone obviously in a human form who can radiate the sense of the divine through them, that can help to guide the way for yourself. And that, like Ramdas says, the guru is really in you. And so I see that as the journey, that there is a need for teachers to help us and to give inspiration, but not to get totally attached, of course, and to give over your power and to give over all your money and your way of being and sense of self to someone, because it's about finding your own self in the world. So there's a balance with it. And there's still the abuse of power that happens, most definitely. That can happen in a lot of relationships, not just the guru-disciple relationship, but even just like husband-wife or boss-coworker or student-teacher or counselor, patient.
Yeah. So what is having all these photos of Maharaji around, which I do as well, and Ramdas, what does that do for you, having that visual aha connection on a visual level? Do you feel like looking at the form of Maharaji then invites you into the true guru within? Describe that feeling for you.
Yeah, for me, it helps me feel like I'm not alone, that I'm supported, that somebody's here with me. And it helps to ease maybe a sense of insecurity, which I think is a root for a lot of us of false belief and disconnection. And so it helps me to feel more secure. It helps me to feel like there is somebody here with me. There is a guide. There is somebody that I can turn to, even if they're not in human form, and have a conversation and feel that unconditional love. Yeah, it's really profound. It's really profound. It helps me feel, secure and seen and heard and received and witnessed. And then within my own self, even just talking about it, I can feel my heart just start to get like bigger and softer. And then that's the feeling that I know that I want to engender in the students that I have is I'm here for you and we're not alone and we are connected and it is possible and you're doing the work.
Beautiful. Now, I'd love to know how it has been for you juggling all these different roles of being a mama, of being a studio owner, being a teacher, a psychologist, like all these big roles to be in. How have you found it, in all honesty, the different chapters and layers of juggling all of that?
It's a lot. I do a lot at once. And I think I perhaps am somebody that maybe even makes it look easy, which I know isn't fair from the outside, but it is quite easy. And a lot of times because I'm doing the things that I really love and I'm doing the things that really nourish me. I'm really involved with music as well. I've been a DJ for a long time and I worked or volunteered at the local radio station here in Boise and had like a weekly show that I would do. And then I would DJ out and then I would travel and I wrote a yoga book and I've got my students in the classes.
And you run a festival.
And I run festivals and I travel and teach at festivals. So it's a great question. And people ask me that, like, how are you able to manage it? And I think I take it in kind of like chunks, like, oh, it's festival season. And I know I've got people at the studio who are supporting me and I'm going to go and do this, but I'll be back. And being a mom, I do the momness whenever I can. I want to have Maya and Benji with me. And, being a partner too is so important to me, especially now that I'm in a new relationship. I've gone through divorce and kind of see partnership in a different way, where I think probably before one of my shadow pieces is perhaps being too independent in a way and not focus in enough into the relationship. And with Krishna, it's one of the things that's so beautiful is that we get to share in that space together. Our work and our personal relationship get to overlap, and that really helps. And there's certainly times where it's like crunch time and I'm like, how am I going to get through all these things? And I look at it like a wave. And in those moments, it might feel like I was surfing the wave and now I'm getting pummeled by the water and I don't know which way is up, but I know I'm going to come back up and then reorient myself and then catch another wave. So I can take like those times where it's really compact and just go through it to the best of my ability, knowing that that's not how it will always be. It's just this way now is an important time to focus in. And I just have this capacity to kind of juggle a lot of different skill sets, I guess, for better or for worse. I'm sort of like master of none in a way, but I love to do lots and lots of different things. And I thought, when I was younger that maybe that was a flaw in my personality. Like I should probably pick one thing and just do that. But that's just not in my design. I think what helps too in my astrology, I have like my sun and my moon and like Mars all in my 10th house, where everything's just kind of like lined up on top of each other, a lot streaming in at once. And so I look at it like, oh, that's just like, again, the design of me in this incarnation, that I'm able to have this big inflow output of energy. And it just happens quite naturally because that's the way that it's designed.
Awesome. It must be fun when people ask when first meeting you, like, what do you do? It'd be a pretty long answer.
It's funny. It's funny that you asked this question too, right? Because I am a yoga teacher and a lifelong yoga teacher, but for some reason internally, I have felt like, well, when I say now I'm a yoga teacher, I don't feel like it gets enough credit. How does that feel for you? Do you have that experience?
I've heard that from people before, which did make me reflect on it a bit. I think over the last, decade, because of the popularization of yoga and the kind of mainstreaming of it, possibly, it doesn't feel what it used to feel like. And Joe and I also kind of chew on that, like almost we don't even want to call it yoga anymore, just because of what the main perception of what yoga is. And it doesn't feel like what we're doing is that. So I hear you on that.
Yeah, it doesn't quite encapsulate it at all.
Yeah, so it's often quite a conversation when someone asks, like, what do you do? Oh, I teach yoga. Sometimes it turns into quite the conversation, because if someone only has that kind of mainstream perception of it, and they'll say like, oh, what do you teach? Like Bikram yoga, or do you teach like hip hop yoga, or and then it turns into quite a cool conversation sometimes.
Other times,
you're having deeper conversations than I am about it.
Well, I was just about to say, sometimes it's the opposite, like eyes rolling, like another yoga teacher,
And that's how I feel. I get looked at a lot, which doesn't feel very good. And so I've been chewing on it a bit, and I'm like, maybe I can call myself like a community organizer, which is a lot of what I do in Boise with the studio and being involved with Tree Fort and the volunteer work that I do. And I'm just a big networker. Like I'm kind of a hub that's connecting all of these different people together. And I love doing that. I love finding matches and mates and pairs and helping elevate the people around me through different connections that we can make. But I don't quite know what to call myself. I don't.
Neither do I. And I like to have fun with that response and just play with it a bit, because it is an interesting time for yoga. It's beautiful how many teachers there are out there now, and how many different approaches there are, and it's very accessible. It's very like anyone can find something for them, which I've really learned to find mainly the positive in what is going on with the yoga popularization. At the same time, it's quite interesting. It'll be interesting to see where it goes,
Yeah, and I think the spread of it and the growth is really beautiful, because there is so much that you can learn about yourself through just a really simple, basic embodied practice.
Yeah.
It's a huge gateway.
Yeah. And on a similar note, there's quite a few studio owners that I know that are feeling the transition. And we spoke a little bit about it, you and I, when we were in Mammoth, but it'd be good to share with the listeners as well, because I know quite a few people in a kind of predicament of they've opened up a studio that was tailoring to that mainstream perception, the mainstream desire to move the body to loud music, kind of like an exercise class. And it feels good. It feels sexy. It feels great. And that's the kind of studio they've opened up. And then all of a sudden, they themselves, the studio owner, have felt an awakening and an evolution of what sadhana is and what their yoga experience is. And then they're wanting to now offer that deeper mode, yet students are dropping off. Criticism, we miss the old you, et cetera, et cetera. I think it'd be nice for you just to share of, if you've had that experience for one, I don't know, or just some wisdom for studio owners and teachers kind of on that edge of they've been doing it a particular way, they're feeling the changes and the growth and the evolution, but it's scary taking that leap into a deeper truth.
Yeah. I personally haven't struggled with that, because my studio, Sage Yoga and Wellness, the classes, I guess I started teaching classes that were mostly vinyasa, or all vinyasa, and geared towards what I thought, like, oh, this is what the market wants. But I also populated it with teachers who I just knew were great teachers that taught what they wanted to teach. So it was never like this top down, this is our style, this is how we teach here. There was always room for every teacher to just be the best teacher that they wanted to be, and allow them all to grow. And we really support each other in that way. And then maybe it was like 2012 or 13 did I first hear of yin yoga. And I had a student say, they just mentioned kind of casually, like, oh, my teacher sometimes used to teach yin yoga and I really liked it. And I had experienced yin actually during my teacher training. Was my first class. It was like one class that one of the assistant teachers taught on yin, where I remember like the first time I held butterfly for 5 minutes, and like what an earth-shattering asana that was, my first 5-minute butterfly. But it stuck with me how powerful it was. And so then when the student mentioned it, flash forward those years later, I was like, oh yeah, I really like that experience. Yeah, it's just holding poses, right? And so I got like Paul Greeley's really small green yin yoga book and self-taught how to teach yin yoga out of that book. And I just started to take a class that was actually a noon class that was called Hot Lunch. It was heated and it was like a power class. And I just showed up and I was like, hey guys, we're going to do a yin class today. You don't know what that is, but I'm going to show you what it is. And we're going to do it together. And so I just kind of like changed a class that was called something totally different into this yin class. And they liked it. And so then I started to do it every other week and they really liked it. And then I'm like, you know what, let's just make this a yin class. And so I just changed it. And it was one of the first yin classes to be offered here in Boise at a studio. And now my studio has at least one yin class a day. And as you've probably seen too, the restorative yin yoga nidra has just like really exploded throughout the yoga scene, which is so wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how I did that change. Was I knew that I wanted to try it out, and I just kind of tested it in a small way, and it worked out. It worked out. And I feel like it's so needed. I guess I go back to within my own self. And when I teach, I have a yoga teacher training program through the studio. And what I really hope to teach those teachers in training is, as long as you are being authentic, that energy is what the students resonate with. It doesn't almost even matter what it is that you're doing. They're resonating with that frequency of authenticity that you're giving them. That's what they're getting out of it. They think it's these poses or this or that, but it's really the energy that you are harnessing through your own embodied authenticity. So it can take lots of different shapes and really change from time to time too. You can go through different waves. So helping the teachers find a way to trust that authentic voice and discover their own authentic voice. And, at the same time, we are all, of course, saying the same thing, and we're all doing the same thing in slightly different ways. And you're going to hear something that a teacher likes, and you kind of cue into it, like, oh, I want to say that same thing the way they said it, or do that pose the way that they did it. And that's great. Like, do that and borrow things. We're all just borrowing things from each other. But then when it comes through you, you'll either know, like, you know what, that worked really well. I love that. That felt good. Or, you know what, that didn't quite work the way that I thought it was going to be when it came from me. I'm not going to do that thing again. So I find in my own teaching that I'm kind of like weaving through that all the time. I love taking classes and learning from teachers and just picking up things here and there and bringing it into my own class. And I do it because, hey, I liked that thing that other teacher did. So now I want to give it to you too. Let's see if you like it also. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just staying with what feels most authentically resonant is, I think, the key points, really. And it might be scary. Yeah, some students might disappear and think that that's not for them, but that's fine. There's another teacher for them somewhere, and you're becoming or are the teacher that, other students will find just perfect for them.
Good advice. I like that. And the Ram Dass teachings always are handy to bring into play, and practicing to not identify with the role of teacher. I think that is helpful. The spiritual ego can become inflamed, when classes are getting popular and people are coming to classes and they're giving you praise and it's all good. And then all of a sudden people aren't coming to class, or they're criticizing you for changing. It's always helpful to, oh yeah, I'm not this role.
Yeah, and it's an ebb and a flow.
Yeah.
It's an ebb and a flow. I've been away. My biggest criticism from my students at my studio now is you're not here enough when we miss you.
Right.
And so I'm getting that from them. And I usually, when I teach, it's a really wonderful big class size. And I taught just this past Tuesday, and it was like maybe a half or a third. And I didn't look at it like, where'd my students go? It's like, oh, I know I haven't been here for you guys, one. And two, this is the perfect class for me today. You know, I'm glad you guys are all here. And sometimes new teachers will be like, or ask like, well, should I teach if just one student shows up? And I'm like, absolutely. I'd never turn a student away. Like and I had that in the beginning when I opened the studio. I'd have one student in my class and I would just say to them, hey, you get a private lesson today. Like, I'm going to focus everything on you. I hope that doesn't make you uncomfortable, but it's just you and me, and we're going to do this. Yeah. And I remember too, a teacher I ran into, I work a lot with Udaya, Udaya.com. I have my classes on there, and they put my book out. And I was over there one summer filming, and there was a teacher from LA who has a very different teaching style than me. And he was kind of quizzing me and kind of like furrowing his brow at me, like, who are you from Boise? And why are you out here? And what do you teach? And tell me about yourself. And I might've said something like, describing the style of self-awakening yoga and helping the students to get in touch with their own body's wisdom and moving at a pace that works for them. And if you go slow enough and with enough awareness, you're never really going to hurt yourself because you're not going to cross that threshold. And then I said something like leaving the students time and the practice to do their own flow and how their body wants to move. And he was like, how dare you? How dare you ever teach like that? The students need to be told always exactly what to do, and they need to listen to exactly what you say. And I was like, whoa, I don't think that at all. I don't think that in the slightest. But he was incredibly dogmatic, like, no, it's up to you as the teacher. You are the one telling them how to be safe, and they have to follow all of your instructions exactly. And I was just like, well, I guess we teach yoga differently. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I've come across that. I guess before I got into yoga, it was very much like that. I was a personal trainer, and I was doing coaching, and it was all very, you do what's on the program. You do what's on the program and you're going to rock it. So by the time I got to yoga, I wanted the complete opposite. I wanted to be intuitive, and I wanted to slow down. So I think I had a big aversion to all of that, my way or the highway type of approach to teaching.
Yeah.
And I think that's continued.
That's out there, I guess, still a little bit. Even when I was making my book through Udaya too, my book is the book I wanted to create was a modern version of Richard Hillman's 28-day exercise plan, because that was published in like 1969 and is quite outdated in some of the language and postures and things like that. So I was inspired by the book to create something else that could be a home practice for people to begin their journey and then go on from there. So it's like, well, how simple, like Richard Hillman, could I create these instructions for people to just get into a practice? And then I remember somebody saying to me, well, then what? Like, what's their next program for you? Like, how are they going to keep with you after they do this book? And I'm like, well, there's lots of great teachers everywhere. You know, they could go study with whoever they want to study with. It doesn't have to be me. I'm just kind of setting them up to begin. Like, here's a little launch pad.
Cool. How can listeners get in touch with this book? Sounds great.
It's on the Udaya, Udaya, Udaya.com, their website. And it was with Udaya, they're all digital. It's video streaming in classes. And it was the first and only book that they've made, which was really wonderful for them to be supportive of me in that way. But I was really adamant to have like a hard copy book. I have it actually right here. It's similar to your book. At least it looks like it. Look at that cover.
Totally.
Isn't it? A big white cover with just some lettering on it.
That's great.
I saw your book, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just like Stuart. But they just sent me all the rest of the hard copy books, and they said we don't want to sell anything hard copy anymore because they have DVDs too. Everything is going digital. So on Udaya, there'll be a PDF of the book, and then what I filmed with them was 27 companion videos. So there's the book, that's the 15 to 20 minute daily practice that's followed by a thought for the day that explains something about the history or philosophy or practice of yoga and the evolution that it's going through in the book to your own practice. So that's in the book. And then the videos are 27 videos that are like companion pieces that are like what we learned in the book, but taken a little bit further. And then there's a wonderful Yoga Nidra video that the music is done by Sheila Bringy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she's a gorgeous like harpist and flautist and kirtan singer. And she's doing the music for me leading this Yoga Nidra. So that's on the Udaya site that they have there. But you can still buy the hard copies of the books too. I think you might have to message me because now I have all of them at my front door.
All right, we'll leave links to all your stuff down below. And what's next? What's lined up for the rest of the year? How's the rest of your year looking?
What's next? Well, I just am about to open up a meditation studio next to my yoga studio in Boise called Source. So Source will be a meditation yoga nidra focused studio and a place for me to also host more workshops and events because my studio space is kind of getting booked out with that. So about to open up a new meditation studio with a couple partners, which is kind of exciting. But I've also been in this way or transition of kind of slowing down, of all the travel and things that I've been doing out in the world and moving through a divorce and kind of like regrounding after that process. I've been more drawn now to just kind of like turn inward for a little bit. So yes, I'm opening up a new meditation studio, but I'm also trying to just realign. It feels like something else wants to come through too. And I'm not sure what that is. So I'm in the process of shedding some things. And that's kind of where I'm at now. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Which feels really good. It feels really good.
I feel like we should end this with a meditation. Do you feel like sharing a meditation for the listeners? just like a couple minutes.
Well, of course, definitely. I feel a little awkward during this podcast because I feel like I've just talked and talked and talked.
No, it's been so lovely. It's been so lovely hearing your voice, getting to know you more. You're such a beautiful, powerful teacher. So I think it's been great for people to get to know you. And I can relate to so much of your story, all the way back from 15. So it was really beautiful to really hear your story. And yeah, you're super inspiring. I think it'd be beautiful to wrap it up with a little meditation. What do you think?
Okay, we can do that for sure. We'll do that for sure. Okay, so how much time do we have? How long of a meditation would you like?
Like just a couple minutes, three to 5 minutes, I think would be beautiful.
Okay. I'll try not to go over that.
It doesn't matter.
When you get into the timeless space.
Yeah.
But okay, so listeners.
I'll gong the bowl if you're going over time.
Perfect. Okay, so let's see. Wherever you're at listening to this podcast, take a moment and allow your eyes to close, signaling to yourself that now is a time to turn inward and begin to slow down and attune to the present moment. Notice your position, whatever it might be, whether you're lying down or standing or seated, and what might help to make you feel more comfortable and supported in this moment. Make those adjustments. And with the eyes closed, bringing awareness to your face and feel your whole face begin to relax. The forehead smooths out, the eyes soften, the cheeks relax as the jaw gets a little bit more slack. The tongue is soft in your mouth. All of the habitual holding patterns in your face begin to dissolve. Feeling that sense of ease begin to move down the neck and the throat the shoulders, down through the arms, feeling heavy in the elbows. Awareness in the palms of your hands, all 10 fingers. And then down the front of the body, across the chest, left and right, down to the heart. See if you can sense your heart beating in your chest. Down to the abdomen, soft in the belly. Let the belly move outward if you've been holding it in. Feeling the hips, the tops of the pelvis. And we'll come back up to the shoulders. Moving along the back of the body, from the shoulder blades, down the spine. Aware of the sides of the body, left and right sides. And again to the hips and pelvis. Down the tubes of the legs, right leg, left leg, to the feet. Feeling the soles of the feet. All 10 toes. Awareness of the whole body, the front of the body, the back of the body, left side, right side, top, bottom, the whole self. Feel the whole self in space. And the breath, breathing through the nose, gently in and out. And as you're aware of your whole self in the breath, feeling the slight pulse outward as you inhale, and the softening in as you exhale, riding that gentle ebb and flow. Staying in the interior of the body, feeling again the heartbeat. Awareness of the heart as it pumps blood, fluid, nutrients all through the body. The silent power of the heart constantly beating. Heartbeat and breath. Whole body awareness. Moving into an even finer sense of self, sensing or imagining the electrical impulses of the nervous system, of prana, of life force energy flowing through the body. The innate, inherent intelligence of the body and its life force. Feeling gratitude for all that the body does, all that your prana and life force does, so that you can have a healthy vehicle for your soul and spirit to embody in this lifetime. Gratitude for all that your body does for you every day, consciously and unconsciously, so that you can enjoy and learn from this human experience. Thank you, body. Thank you, breath. Thank you, heartbeats. Thank you, prana. Receiving in this gratitude from self for self. Soft smile on the face. Noticing how you feel in this moment. What emotions are present. And breathing that in, deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Another breath in and out. As you're ready, blinking the eyes open.
Thank you, Radha.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Ram Ram.
Ram Ram. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you so much. So great to connect. Let's do this again. I'm really delighted in that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I would love to. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it so much.
Until next time, much love.
Yes, much love.